Emma stood at the edge of the small chapel, her hands trembling around the strap of her favorite camera. She had planned to capture every moment of today, to freeze the memory of her mother's final goodbye in photographs she could hold close, forever. The morning light filtered through stained glass windows, painting the wooden pews in soft shades of rose and gold. Flowers in gentle pastel hues filled the air with a sweet, comforting scent. Emma inhaled deeply as if the fragrance could steady her racing heart. Inside the coffin lay her mother, Margaret, dressed in a pale blue dress embroidered with tiny white flowers. It was the dress she had worn on the day Emma graduated from high school, full of pride and hope. Emma felt a twist of guilt that she had not suggested a different outfit, but her mother had insisted on this one. She had smiled that gentle, knowing smile, the one that made Emma feel understood and loved no matter what. Emma stepped forward and placed a single white rose on the satin lining beside her mother's hands. The petals brushed the polished wood, leaving a faint pink smudge on the glossy surface. She lifted the camera to her eye, planning to take one last image of her mother's peaceful face. But her fingers, slick with tears, lost their grip. Camera slipped from her grasp and tumbled into the coffin with a sharp clatter against the metal clasps. Time froze. The clicking of the shutter turned into a dull echo in Emma's mind. She stared in horror as the strap and lens peeked out from under the satin pillow. Her mother's body lay completely still, but Emma felt as if the world had stopped breathing. A hush fell over the room. Every guest turned, their faces a blend of sympathy and surprise. Some gasped, others shifted uncomfortably. Emma's cheeks burned with shame. She wanted to plunge her hand in and retrieve the camera at once, but custom and grief held her back. What would people think? She swallowed hard, feeling swallowed by guilt. Her throat tightened so much she could barely speak. She tried to lift her hand, but it felt heavy, as if she had planted it in cement. From the front row, Emma's best friend Sarah rose and moved forward. She wore a soft gray dress and held a bouquet of lilies. Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her steps were steady. She knelt beside Emma and whispered, "I'll get it. Don't worry." Emma shook her head, but Sarah placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Then, with quiet dignity, Sarah leaned in and lifted the camera from the coffin. Careful not to disturb anything else, Emma watched, her breath catching. The camera's metal frame was cold and unyielding under Sarah's fingertips. When Sarah handed it back, Emma almost refused to take it. The shame weighed too much, but she forced herself to accept it, wrapping the strap around her wrist so it could not fall again. Her hands still shook. The camera felt suddenly too heavy to hold. The priest, Father Michael, cleared his throat softly. His voice, rich and calm, floated through the chapel. In moments like these, we are reminded of our human frailty. We stumble, we err, but we carry on. Emma looked up. His gentle eyes held no judgment. He carried on with the service, speaking of love, remembrance, and the promise of peace. The words wrapped around her like a warm blanket. Emma refocused the camera on her mother's face. Through the viewfinder, she saw her own blurred reflection, tear tracks shining on her cheek. She pressed the shutter, careful this time. The click was soft. Margaret's face filled the frame, every line and crease marked by time and love. Emma lowered the camera and blinked away fresh tears. After the final blessing, mourners filed past the coffin to pay their respects. Emma remained standing at the back. She watched her mother's friends, cousins, and neighbors approach. Each one placed a single flower on the coffin or offered a small word of comfort. Some pressed a hand to Emma's arm, others whispered memories of Margaret's kindness, her laughter, the way she lit up every room she entered. Sarah stood by Emma's side, holding a small notebook. "Do you want to say something?" she asked softly. Emma shook her head. Words felt hollow. She just needed to keep breathing. After a while, Emma realized that the ceremony was coming to an end. The organist struck the final chord, a deep, resonant note that seemed to linger in the air. Emma took one last look at her mother. She raised the camera again, this time with the steadiness she had hoped to find. She captured the edge of the coffin, the soft fabric of the lining, and the gentle curves of the rose. She wanted to remember not only her mother's face, but also the love that filled this place. She pushed her sorrow aside for a moment, determined to create something beautiful. From this pain, when the mourners began to leave, Emma felt a bittersweet pang. She imagined her mother watching, smiling at the gathering, grateful that so many people cared. Emma closed her eyes and whispered, "I love you, Mama." Her voice was barely audible, but it carried all the devotion she had ever felt. Outside, the sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting bright light over the funeral home gardens. Emma set the camera down on a small table near the exit, where a few envelopes and donation slips sat. She needed a moment to collect herself before facing the world beyond those doors. Sarah stayed close, slipping her arm through Emma's. Sarah said with a small, supportive laugh, "We rescued the camera." "Now what?" Emma managed a shaky smile. "Now," she said, "I have to see if anything survived on that memory card." Nara nodded and held out Emma's hand. Together, they walked toward the chapel's side door, where a small office waited. Emma could already feel her heart pounding with a mix of dread and hope. In the bright hallway, Emma realized how much she still had to do. She needed to sort her mother's things, plan a celebration of life next week, and reach out to her scattered family members. But first, she had to face whatever images her camera had captured. She felt a strange knot of excitement and fear tightening in her chest. What if the photos were ruined? What if they offered no comfort or closure? What if they showed something she was not ready to see? Emma opened the office door. The small room smelled faintly of coffee and old files. A low desk lamp glowed beside a computer monitor. Next to it lay a stack of blank photo paper and a few tea bags and a chipped mug. Her camera bag rested on a chair. Emma reached out and unzipped it, her fingers brushing against the smooth metal of the camera body. She removed the memory card and paused, staring at the tiny rectangle in her hand. It held the last moments she had shared with her mother. Emma placed the memory card into a card reader plugged into the computer. Screen flickered, and soon a folder named DCIM appeared. She clicked it open. Files filled the window, arranged by time. The first few were thumbnails of flowers, chairs, and people's feet. Emma scrolled down. Then she found the last images she had taken before the drop. She double-clicked. The photo opened. Her mother's face looked serene, bathed in soft light. Emma let out a shaky breath. She scrolled to the next image, the one after the drop. There was a blur of movement, a satin swirl, and something dark in the corner. Emma leaned forward, her heartbeat quickened. She knew then that this story was far from over. What the photos might reveal could change everything she thought she understood about that final moment. And deep down, Emma realized she would not be able to turn away. She would have to look, to know, and to find out what really happened when her camera fell into her mother's coffin. Emma sat at her kitchen table long after dinner, the only light coming from her laptop screen. The day's sun had faded, and outside the window, the sky had turned a deep navy blue. She had poured herself a cup of chamomile tea, hoping its warmth would calm her nerves. But every time she lifted the mug, her hand shook so much that she spilled tiny drops onto the wooden surface. She wiped them away without thinking, her eyes glued to the image on the screen. The first few pictures were normal, friends hugging. Flowers arranged in neat bouquets, the coffin in its satin bed. Then came the blurred shot from the moment the camera fell. Emma saw the strap swinging, the lens cap rolling off, and something dark in the corner she could not recognize. She clicked forward. The next image showed the camera strap tangled across the satin pillow. A crease ran through the fabric as if something heavy had pressed down on it. Emma held her breath. She moved to the following frame and gasped. There, at the edge of her mother's sleeve, was a pale hand. It curled around the camera's edge. Emma's heart thudded so loud she could hear it in her ears. She leaned closer, her eyes straining. The hand looked too lifelike. Its skin was mottled and cold, like her mother's had been. But why would it move? Emma forced herself to scroll on. The next photo was even more startling. The sleeve had shifted, and she could see a wrist and part of an arm. The camera sat at an odd angle, almost balanced on the edge of the coffin. Emma closed her eyes and took a shaky breath. She needed someone else to look at these photos. She needed to know she was not losing her mind. Emma picked up her phone and called her old friend Mark, a professional photographer who knew cameras inside out. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Em, what's up?" His voice was calm, familiar, a soothing presence after a day of chaos. "Mark, I need you to look at something," Emma said, her voice trembling. "Can you come over? It's important." "Sure," he replied. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Emma hung up and closed the laptop. She felt both relieved and nervous. In a few minutes, someone else would confirm or deny what she had seen. She tried to sip her tea, but it had gone cold. She set the mug aside and smoothed her hair. She wished she could feel more composed. Instead, she felt hollow, like the weight of her mother's absence had hollowed her out from the inside. There was a knock at the door. Emma opened it to find Mark holding a small bag of snacks and a comforting grin. He stepped inside and waved the bag. "Thought you might get hungry." He placed it on the table and sat beside Emma. He reached for the laptop. "Show me." Emma reopened the folder and scrolled to the key images. She paused on the first photo that showed her mother's hand gripping the camera. Mark leaned in, his brow furrowing. "That looks odd," he said softly. "Definitely not lens flare or a glitch. But cameras don't move on their own, I know," Emma whispered. "It feels like she reached for it." She swallowed. "But she's gone, Mark." Mark studied the photos in silence for a long moment. Then he said, "I think we should get a second opinion. I know someone in forensic photography. She might tell us if this is staged or if it could be an accident." He tapped his phone. "I'll call her tomorrow." Emma nodded, feeling grateful. "Thank you." She realized her throat was tight. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this." "You're not dragging me," Mark said. "You need help. I'm here." After he left, Emma stared at the empty cup and the darkened living room. She wondered what she had gotten herself into. Was she chasing a ghost or uncovering something real? She felt both excitement and dread. She could not rest until she knew. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Emma's kitchen window as she waited for Mark's call. She wrapped her hands around a fresh mug of tea, listening to its steam hiss. Her phone buzzed. It was Mark. His voice came through, steady and sure. "I talked to Christine, the forensic photographer. She says you should bring her the camera and the memory card. She examined everything: metadata, timestamps, any signs of digital tampering." Emma felt a flicker of hope. "Okay, can we meet today?" "Sure, she's free this afternoon, between 2 and 4. They agreed on a time. Emma felt her spirits lift. She had a plan now. She spent the morning sorting through her mother's belongings, finding comfort in small tasks. She folded her mother's favorite scarf, arranged books on a shelf, and set aside a box of letters to read later. Each item brought a memory, a pang of loss, and a spark of warmth. At 2 o'clock, Emma met Christine in a bright office filled with framed photographs on the walls. The air smelled faintly of ink and coffee. Christine, a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a friendly smile, greeted Emma warmly. "Heard you have an unusual case," she said, her tone professional but kind. Emma handed over the camera and memory card. Christine examined the camera carefully, her fingers gentle yet precise. She opened the memory card slot, removed the card, and slid it into a reader. "I'll run some tests," she said. "It may take an hour. Why don't you sit and have some tea?" Emma nodded and sat in a soft chair. Christine placed the camera on a foam cushion and turned to her computer. Emma felt exposed, like she had laid bare a secret that she might regret sharing. She picked up a magazine from a side table and tried to read, but her eyes kept drifting to the camera, sitting silent and still. After what felt like an eternity, Christine looked up. "I've gone through the photos frame by frame. I also checked the timestamps. Everything is as you shot it, no edits, no missing frames. The camera's clock was correct. There's nothing digital that would have caused those movements." She paused, as if choosing her words. "Physically, I see no trick. The movement in the photos is real." Emma's heart pounded. "So you think my mother's body actually moved?" "It appears so," Christine said gently. Bodies can sometimes shift just after death before rigor mortis sets fully. The muscles contract and stiffen, and sometimes that movement can be sudden. It might look alarming in a series of still photographs. She opened a book on anatomical changes after death and showed Emma diagrams. This is called post-mortem movement. It's rare to catch it so clearly, but it can happen. Emma nodded slowly, absorbing the explanation. It made sense, but it felt surreal. She thought back to the coffin moment, the silent chapel, the way her mother's hand had seemed to reach. She imagined tiny muscles twitching life's final echoes. The scientific explanation grounded her trembling mind. Christine smiled kindly. I know it's hard, but there's no sign of foul play. No one disturbed the coffin. It's just a rare phenomenon. She handed Emma a printed report. Keep this for your records. Emma thanked her and left the office, clutching the report and the camera. Outside, a soft breeze rustled the trees lining the street. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The terror she had felt began to ease, replaced by a quiet wonder at the mystery of life and death. On her way home, Emma stopped by a small florist. She picked up another white rose and some lavender sprigs. The service, the photos. She wanted to honor her mother with something beautiful. She decided to arrange a small memorial at home, back in her living room. Emma placed the rose and lavender in a glass vase and set it beside the laptop. She opened the photos again, scrolling slowly. She paused on the image of her mother's peaceful face. Then she looked at the next frame, the pale hand. She felt her chest tighten. It was a solemn reminder that her mother's body had its own voice, even in stillness. Emma closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for letting me capture that moment." She clicked through the rest of the images, noticing every detail. The linen's soft folds, the glint of metal clasps, the gentle curve of her mother's wrist. Each photo told a story, blending grief with awe. Later that evening, Emma sat with Sarah over dinner. She recounted everything: the photos, Christine's explanation, her swirling emotions. Sarah listened, her eyes full of understanding. "It must have been hard," she said softly. "But you did the right thing by finding the truth," Emma nodded. "I needed to know, and I needed to make peace with it." She smiled faintly. "It's strange, but I feel closer to her now, like she left me one last message." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand. "Your mother would be proud." Emma looked down at her hand, still feeling the warmth of her friend's support. She realized that life moved in mysterious ways through love, memory, and even the final, quiet gestures of a woman she would always cherish. And although the photos had revealed something terrifying at first, it also given her a gift, a deeper understanding of the fragile, beautiful dance between life and death. Emma awoke before dawn, her mind still alive with questions. The house was cool and quiet. She wrapped herself in a soft blanket on the sofa by the window and opened her laptop. The first light of morning crept across the sky in pale lavender and gold. She sipped her tea slowly, the warmth soothing her nerves. Today she planned to look deeper into the photos and see what lay beneath the surface. She began by reviewing every image she had taken that day. She opened the folder and scrolled through the thumbnails. Each picture held a small memory: the gentle smile of her mother, the hush of the chapel, the delicate petals of the flowers. Then she reached the blurred shot of the falling camera. It felt like looking at a secret message from beyond. Emma clicked carefully to enlarge it. She studied the looping strap, the satin crease, and the hint of something dark at the edge. Her pulse quickened. She saved a copy of the photo to a new folder titled Investigation. She wanted to isolate the image so she could compare it side by side with the next frames. She opened her image editor and placed the two photos next to each other. The first frame showed only the camera strap and lens cap among the folds of fabric. The second showed the pale hand emerging. Emma zoomed in on the hand's pale skin, the way the fingers curled as though grasping the camera. The sleeve's fabric seemed to fold differently, as if weight had shifted. Emma frowned. She wondered whether the funeral home had used any special lining or foam padding that could have affected the coffin's interior. She searched her email for the funeral home's contract. The message sat in her inbox, confirming basic services: the coffin model, the floral arrangements, the transportation. Nothing about special features. She printed the invoice and highlighted. The coffin type, a simple wooden shell with satin lining. No foam, no extra padding. She tapped her finger on her desk. The lining alone could not explain such movement. She opened a browser and searched for post-mortem movement coffin lining. Articles appeared from mortuary science sites. Read that during the first hours after death, muscles can contract or relax before full stiffness sets in, what could cause limbs to shift or hands to move. Rare, but documented. She read one personal story from a mortician who found a hand crossing a chest when the coffin was reopened for viewing. The writer described the moment as eerie but normal. Emma printed the page and taped it beside her printed invoice. She pinched her lips, feeling both comforted and unsettled. She decided to visit the chapel again, to see the coffin in person and ask gentle questions. Late morning, she drove to the funeral home. The lot was empty, sun warmed the pavement, and the building looked peaceful. She walked in with a polite knock on the office door. The funeral home manager, Mr. Lewis, greeted her with a kind nod. He recognized her from the service. "Hello, Emma. How can I help you today?" he asked, leading her to a small meeting room. Emma set her papers on the table. "I'm following up on some questions about the coffin lining and the service," she said softly. There were some images I took that showed movement in the coffin, and I want to understand more about how the coffin was prepared." Mr. Lewis nodded and offered her water. "Of course, we used a standard satin lining. No foam or special inserts. Let me show you the sample lining we keep here." Brought a swatch of the same fabric and laid it on the table. Emma touched. The silky surface. It felt smooth and light, nothing that would hold weight. "Is there any chance the lining could slip or fold in a way that makes a limb appear to move?" she asked. He considered. "It's possible the fabric can shift. But the body is heavy. Once placed gently inside, it normally stays in position." He gestured to a diagram on the wall showing coffin assembly. "We follow a careful protocol. The coffin is closed and sealed after viewing. No one touches it afterward." Emma thanked him and left with a better sense of the process. Walking back to her car, she felt determined. The photos were real. Her mother's hand must have moved, but she wanted to know if any other factor might have influenced it. She breathed deeply, sunlight warming her face. She felt closer to an answer. Back home, Emma spread her research across the kitchen table. Printed articles, the invoice, the photos. She took a fresh sheet of paper and drew a timeline. First, the service began at 2 o'clock. At some point near the end, she dropped the camera. The coffin seemed still for most of the service. Then, these two frames showed movement within seconds. The timeline helped her see that the movement was captured in 2 successive photos. No long gap. It meant the shift happened fast. She made a quick phone call to her cousin Jake, who lived 2 states away but was close to her mother. "Jake," she said when he answered, "did Mom ever talk about any medical issues like spasms or tremors that could continue after death?" Jake listened. "She had twitching sometimes after surgery. Nothing big. But that stopped long before the funeral." He paused. "She didn't have any condition that made her wrists move on their own, did she?" Emma told him about the photos. He grew quiet. "That's unsettling. But I think what mortuary experts say could explain it. Our bodies do strange things." After death, Emma thanked him. She felt a surge of sadness missing her mother's laughter. But she quietly told herself that science offered a clearer path than ghost stories. She returned to her timeline and wrote a note. Post-mortem movement likely cause. She smiled at her neat handwriting. For the first time, she felt hope that she could share the true explanation. She spent the afternoon drafting an email. To the funeral director, she wanted to publish a short essay about her experience to help others understand post-mortem movement and to offer comfort. She outlined the key points. Why the photos looked unsettling. Scientific reasons, reassurance that nothing supernatural was at work. She attached her photos with captions. Then she paused and read it again. Would anyone want to read this? Would they judge her for sharing private moments? She took a deep breath and clicked send. That evening, Emma joined Sarah and Mark for a small dinner at her house. She served baked salmon, roasted vegetables, and a simple salad. The table glowed with soft candlelight. They ate and laughed gently about shared memories of Margaret. Then Emma took a deep breath. "I sent an essay to the funeral home and a few online mortuary blogs," she said. "I want to help people understand what happened to my mother's hand." Sarah reached for her hand. "That's brave. It could help a lot of people feel less scared." Mark nodded. "Your mother's story could bring comfort, and your photos, they're powerful." Emma looked at both friends. "Thank you. That's sharing. This might make her legacy more than just grief. Maybe it could bring knowledge." They toasted softly to that. Emma felt something open inside her, a sense of purpose amid her sorrow. Later, she returned to her study. She reopened her folder of photos. She selected a frame-by-frame sequence and arranged them in a slideshow with simple captions, dropped camera, merges. She practiced narrating the story out loud, imagining a small online audience. Her voice trembled at first, then grew firmer as she spoke the words. These images show a rare moment of post-mortem movement. Though it looks alarming, it is a natural process. She saved the slideshow and decided she would post it after a few days of rest. For now, she closed her laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the gentle hum of her heater. She whispered goodnight to her mother and slipped beneath the covers. Feeling a quiet peace, photos would always remind her of that terrifying moment, but now she understood. Life and death were woven in strange, beautiful ways, and she would honor her mother by sharing the truth. Emma woke early to the soft glow of her phone screen buzzing with notifications. She rubbed her eyes and saw dozens of messages about her essay. The post had appeared on the funeral home's blog and a popular mortuary science forum, people wrote. Words of thanks, relief, even wonder. Some shared their own stories of strange post-mortem movements. Emma felt a flutter of pride mixed with nervousness. Had she revealed too much? Would someone judge her for posting private images of her mother's final moments? She brewed a fresh pot of tea and sat at her desk, scrolling through the comments. One reader wrote, "Thank you for explaining this. I thought I saw my grandmother's hand move." Another said, "Your story gave me comfort when I needed it." Emma's heart warmed. She realized that sharing her experience had helped others face their grief. A few comments questioned whether the movement was real or some hidden trick. Emma clicked on one discussion where a user named Truthseeker suggested natural causes, while another, Ghostwatcher, insisted the photos showed a spirit reaching out. Emma sighed. She had hoped the science would quiet all doubt, but she knew belief often defied reason. Suddenly, an email arrived from Christine, the forensic photographer. The subject line read, "Further analysis." Emma clicked it open. Christine had examined the metadata in more detail. She found a single frame between the two Emma had noticed so quick that it had not appeared in the original preview. Christine attached a high-resolution image. Emma downloaded it and gasped. In that in-between frame, she saw her mother's face, eyes open, mouth slightly parted, as though gasping for air. The expression was neither peaceful nor angry, but urgent, as if reaching for one last breath. Emma's chest tightened. The photo was so clear, it felt like a small window into that solemn moment. Emma leaned back in her chair, staring at the image. A chill ran down her spine. This was not just a hand shifting. This was a face alive with emotion. She stared until her eyes blurred. She closed the laptop and took a deep breath, pressing her palms to her eyes. Had her mother really opened her eyes after death? Christine's note said it could be an artifact of light reflection, yet Christine admitted it puzzled her too. Emma felt the weight of the photo pull at her heart. She needed to understand more. She called Christine immediately. When Christine answered, Emma's voice shook. "Christine, I saw the extra frame. The face. What do you think it is?" Christine's tone was gentle. "It may be the lining catching a shadow, a fold in the fabric reflecting light. Or it could be a natural post-mortem change in the eye sockets. Sometimes, as the muscles in the face relax, the lids part slightly. With the right angle and lighting, it could look like the eyes are open." Emma rested her forehead on her palm. I want to believe that, but I can't stop thinking of her reaching for me one last time. Grief plays tricks on us, Christine said. We see what we need to see. Doesn't mean it's not real, but it may not be supernatural. Emma thanked her friend and hung up. She stared at the photo again. She felt comforted and unsettled at once. It was haunting to see her mother's face in that state. She closed her laptop and wrapped herself in a blanket on the sofa. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, soft and kind. Emma tried to find peace in the warmth. Later that day, Emma decided to visit the coroner's office. She wanted to see a professional environment where she could learn about the final stages of death. The coroner's office was in a brick building at the edge of town, quiet and serious. Emma checked in at the desk and explained her purpose. She asked to speak with someone in the pathology department. Dr. Rivera, a kindly middle-aged woman in a crisp white coat, greeted her. She led Emma into a small consultation room with medical posters on the walls. Emma showed Dr. Rivera the photos on her phone. The doctor studied them carefully, her brow furrowed in concentration. These are remarkable, Dr. Rivera said. You captured a rare moment. After death, the body goes through stages. First, cells lose energy and muscles relax. Then, shortly afterward, they stiffen rigor mortis. During that transition, small movements can occur. Even the eyelids can. Part of the underlying tissue shifts. Emma nodded, following every word. So the face in the photo could be a natural effect? It could, Dr. Rivera said. But it could also be an illusion of light and shadow. Our brains are wired to recognize faces even in patterns. You see it in clouds or wood grain. It's called pareidolia. Emma had heard that term before. She felt her heartbeat slow as the scientific explanation settled in. So I might be seeing my wish that she reached out. Dr. Rivera gave a gentle smile. It's natural to want that. It's part of mourning, but understanding the science can help you find closure. Emma thanked her. She felt a wave of relief. She had tested her heart's hope against reason and found it plausible that her mother's parting gesture was a mix of physics and biology and perhaps her own longing. She left the coroner's office feeling lighter. On the drive home, Emma thought about the balance between truth and emotion. She realized that her desire to see her mother one last time shaped how she viewed the images, but knowing the natural causes did not diminish her love or the power of her memories. Instead, it gave her a clearer path to say goodbye. Back at home, Emma set the high-resolution image beside the earlier photos on her desk. She printed a small series of 4 pictures: the resting face, the dropped camera, the hand emerging, the fleeting open eyes. She placed them on a board and wrote simple labels with a fine pen. Then she sat back and studied the sequence. It told a story, a final breath, a slip, a grasp, a silent farewell. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. She closed them and whispered, "Thank you, Mama." She thought of her mother's gentle smile, her warm hugs, the way she always listened. Those memories were more real than any photograph. Images simply captured a moment in a larger life story. That evening, Emma joined Sarah and Mark again, this time for a quiet movie night at her place. They watched a light comedy to lift her spirits. During a break, Sarah handed Emma a small gift box. Inside was a delicate charm shaped like a rose. "For your camera strap," Sarah said. "So you can carry it with you and think of your mom when you take pictures." Emma slipped the charm onto the strap and smiled. She felt grateful for her friend's kindness. She realized that the photos, the science, and the story, all of it, had drawn her closer to understanding grief and love. She did not need a final, ghostly message. She already carried her mother's memory in her heart. Before bed, Emma sat by her mother's small memorial at home. The rose and lavender still smelled sweet. She placed a hand on the vase and closed her eyes. She thought of the chapter of her journey she had completed. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and grief. She had sought truth and found compassion. She was ready for the final step, sharing her story fully and finding lasting peace. And with that thought, she switched off the light and let sleep come gently. Emma sat at her desk early the next morning, sunlight spilling across her papers. She looked at the 4 printed photos lined up in front of her. Each one told a small part of the story. Her mother's peaceful face, the camera slipping, the hand reaching, the eyes opening. Emma breathed in deeply. Today she would finish what she had started and share the last part of this journey with the people who had watched her through every step. She opened her laptop and navigated to the blog post she had begun days ago. She added a new section at the end, her fingers moving steadily across the keys. She wrote about what came after understanding the science. She described how seeing her mother's hand and face move had made her feel both frightened and connected. She explained how talking with experts helped her find peace, and how her friend's kindness had carried her through dark moments. She typed, "In the end, I realized that love is stronger than fear, and that memory can heal us." She paused, rereading the words. They felt true and warm. Emma added one final image to the post, a photo of the small charm Sarah had given her, hanging from the camera strap. She wrote that the charm symbolized how her mother's memory would travel with her in every snapshot she took. Then she hit publish. A soft chime sounded. Ow! The post went live. Within minutes, her screen filled with new comments. Some readers shared stories of their own loved ones. Others wrote simple words of comfort. "Thank you for showing us that even in loss, there can be beauty, and your mother would be proud." Emma felt a tear roll down her cheek. She smiled, imagining her mother reading those notes. She whispered, "We did it, Mama." After breakfast, Emma prepared to visit the cemetery one last time. She dressed in a light blue cardigan, her mother's favorite color, and slipped on her shoes. She wrapped the camera strap with its new charm around her wrist. It felt like a gentle promise. She stepped outside into the fresh morning air, the sky a pale shade of hope. The drive was quiet. Emma thought about how much had changed since the day of the funeral. She remembered the shock of the camera drop, the fear in the chapel, the long nights poring over images. She thought of Christine's careful words, of Dr. Rivera's explanations, of Sarah and Mark's support. She felt gratitude for every moment. That had helped her understand and heal. At the cemetery gate, Emma paused. The grass was green and soft, dotted with small wildflowers. She walked slowly along the path to her mother's grave. A gentle breeze rustled the trees overhead. She knelt beside the headstone, its smooth surface cool under her fingertips. Fresh flowers stood in a vase, a small bouquet of lavender and white roses that she had placed earlier in the week. Emma opened her camera and looked through the viewfinder. She framed the headstone, the flowers, and a beam of light filtering through the branches. Then she clicked. The sound was soft but felt like a heartbeat. She lowered the camera and smiled. She felt her mother's presence in the light and the breeze. She stood and placed a hand on the headstone. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for everything." She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She imagined her mother's kind smile, her gentle voice, and the way she held Emma's hand on each birthday. She felt a calm settle in her chest. Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. Inside were notes she had made throughout this journey, questions, scientific terms, feelings, quotes from friends. She flipped to the last page and wrote, "Grief taught me how to love more deeply." Then she closed the notebook and tucked it into her bag. She turned and walked back, toward the gate. As she left, she looked one more time at the light moving through the leaves. She believed that was her mother, sending a promise of warmth. Back at home, Emma decided to make an album of all the photos she had taken during and after the funeral. She spread them out across her table, the flowers, the chapel, the blurred strap, the hand, the open eyes, and the new photos she had taken of the grave. She selected her favorites and placed them in clear sleeves of a small photo book. With each image she slid in, she whispered a memory. "That was the moment I slipped. That was when I first saw movement. That was when I understood." When she reached the photo of the charm on her camera strap, she smiled and said, "And that is how I carry you with me." After the album was complete, Emma called Sarah and Mark to invite them over. She arranged the living room so the album lay open on a low table. When her friends arrived, Emma guided them to sit around it She walked them through every picture and every caption, telling them the story she had lived. Sarah listened with wide eyes, nodding, and Mark reached out to put a hand on Emma's shoulder. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, and then Sarah said, "That was beautiful." Mark added, "Your honesty and your love shine." Through every page, Emma felt a glow in her heart. She realized that sharing her story had woven her friends and readers into her mother's memory. Later, Sarah and Mark stayed for dinner. They opened a bottle of sparkling juice and toasted to new beginnings. "To Emma," Sarah said, "who showed us how to find hope in the hardest moments." They clinked glasses, and Emma felt tears of gratitude in her eyes. After they left, Emma sat by the window, the album on her lap. She thought about what came next. Her mother's passing had changed everything, but it also opened her eyes to the fragility and the beauty of life. Made a quiet promise to herself, she would keep taking photos, not only of loss and grief, but of joy, laughter, and everyday moments. She would look for beauty in simple things: a child's smile, sunlight on a river, a loved one's hand. Emma reached for her camera and held it close. She saw the charm glint in the light. She whispered, "Let's go make some new memories." She stood and walked outside to the small garden behind her house. The air was cool and sweet. She found a bright yellow sunflower turning toward the sun. She lifted her camera and captured its golden bloom. She smiled broadly. With that photo, Emma felt a free, light joy. She knew her mother was still with her, not just in the haunting images, but in every new moment of wonder. She would continue the story through her lens, carrying love and memory into each frame. And she knew that, even when the unexpected happened, she had the strength to face it, to seek the truth, and to find peace.